So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope we can keep you awake after lunch with a little panel discussion here around the opportunities for wind in the rest or in a few selected other countries. May I just introduce the participants in this panel? From the left is Henning Detmar, who is the CEO of the German Wind Energy Association. To his right, we have Maria McCafferty, who is the CEO of the Renewable Energy Organization in the UK, so also more than just wind. To her right, we have Jan Hyllebjerg from the Danish Wind Association, and to my left, Sonia Loiret from the French Wind Energy Association. Myself, I'm Thomas Becker. I am leading the European Wind Energy Association. I think I've said that a few times now. So we, so to say, represent a broad group of people that are working with wind, with the conditions for wind, the political as well as economical in Europe. And we would like to share some of our experiences and have a little debate on that. Now I will try to set the scene for the participants, and then I would like them to give their take on the following. You know that wind has grown at a fast pace in almost all countries in Europe over the past 10 years. We have had in 2001 the Renewable Electricity Directive, which is the legal basis in the EU for that, and that was followed in 2009 by the Directive of your Renewable Energy. This is the legal basis in the EU. Secondly, as wind has grown, meeting today over 8% of all EU electricity consumption, it has taken shares from other technologies whose installations are declining, and that is mostly nuclear and coal. Nuclear and coal are our strongest competitors, and they are not very pleased with that, I can assure you. We also today face severe challenges in Europe. In a very few years, we have to replace over half of our power plants in Europe, bringing us into a new investment circle. And that big, huge investment we have in front of us on energy in Europe, we have a stagnating power consumption due to the economic downturn, leading us to increasing power bills, and that is the schisma. While the power bill is going up, the spot prices for electricity is at as low as ever. And finally, on top of all that, you have seen the crisis in Ukraine, that the energy dependence in Europe has become a very important political item. Now the new European Commission wants to tackle these challenges with renewables, and we are happy for that. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody here. They would like to make a European Union and be number one, a European energy union, and be number one renewable energy as a very strong component of that energy union. but we are in a period of political uncertainty and instability in many countries in the EU at the same time. So I would like, and that has set the scene, to ask these members of the panel, will the newly agreed climate and energy package, do you think, which goes to 2030, will that put us on the right track? This is my first question to the members of the panel, and please also try to elaborate a little around what I said in the beginning, if you agree with that, seen from your national perspective. Why don't we start with Maria? No, sorry, because you want to make a presentation. Why don't we start with Sonia, and then we take Maria's intervention. Sonia, please.
Yes. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. France, I think France is a bit of a special case in Europe. First, I mean, this 2009 directive giving us 2020 targets was very important in France because it was the first time we had a real political target for renewables. We are pretty lagging behind in terms of renewable as compared to my neighbors. Then the 2030 targets is a new step. To tell you the truth, for once, in France we are a bit ahead of time because we have a law into discussion setting a target of 32% of renewable by 2030. But a target, I mean, is absolutely necessary, but it's not enough to make sure that we actually meet the target. I mean, in France, what we've seen in the last years was that the development was much bigger than before, but still low with ups and downs. And the ups and downs were very much dependent on the political will of the government. And you have to know, I think it depends a bit of the country, but we talk a lot about the European market. But the European market, at least in my viewpoint, it's still very much national markets, one next to the other. We can't really think that there's one market. And in France, I think it's still very true because there's not really a market. I mean, I think 80% of the electricity is not on the market yet. So this is when Europe has to play a leading role into changing this mindset, and I think this can apply to many countries. It's kind of, you can't have, I mean, energy is a very political subject, a very political issue, with normally very strong stakeholders. And if you want to have renewable, and if you want to have a high share of renewable, you will need to change the whole model to make it much more decentralized with lots of new stakeholders. And this is where the difficulty is in France, and I think in many countries as well, and many developing countries as well. Because, I mean, yeah, it's a whole change of mindset, it's a whole change of also subsidized electricity to non-subsidized electricity. So this 2030 targets is a real input for us, but it won't be enough. So we need to have, from Europe, a real drive into making a real market and a place into this market for the renewable energy players. Otherwise, we won't reach the target. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Should I, Maria? Would you be so kind as to make your presentation now? Thank you.
I remarked a little bit earlier about how refreshing it is for somebody as short as me to be able to see over the top of the lectern. So at least I can see you. And that makes a nice change for me. When asked to provide some background information about the UK, I thought the easiest way to do it, and in a way that we can make available to you so you don't have to make so many notes, would be in a short presentation. So Here we go. Renewable UK is the largest renewable energy trade association in the United Kingdom. We have some 583 corporate members, and they come from a range of sectors in renewable. We are only concerned with renewable electricity, but we go beyond wind, and we represent marine technologies, which include wave power and tidal power. We have 55 members of staff, and we're spread around 4 offices in the United Kingdom. We have this group of sponsoring members. These are our key, very elite members, but you'll see some overlap with the sponsors of this event, and RES, I noticed, and Siemens, and perhaps 1 or 2 others. So lots of common interest right across Europe. On a worldwide basis, we are at the end of 2013 of the 318,000 megawatts of wind energy, sort of worldwide. United Kingdom was in 6th place, and we were behind these five countries. My point here is not really a rank to put us in a position. It's to draw attention to the fact that of the 318,000 megawatts we have deployed worldwide, only 7 of those are offshore. The rest are onshore. And of that 7,000 megawatts, just over half is in the United Kingdom or in United Kingdom territorial waters. And this is a huge growth market for us. We don't expect to remain in leadership of the world indefinitely, but for the time being, we have just a little more than the rest of the world put together. So why wind in the United Kingdom? It is a very, very abundant natural resource. And for at least 7 or 8 years, the United Kingdom has been a net importer of both oil and gas. So the price of those fuels is very volatile, particularly when it's imported, and the supply can be rather vulnerable. So it makes eminently good sense to secure our supplies, and we know that that is a facet that is motivating the Turkish government to secure supplies. And when you secure supply, you take the first step towards stabilizing electricity prices. I'm very proud that the United Kingdom is, I think, the first and possibly still the only, but Thomas usually knows a lot more about these things to me, but we have actually passed a Climate Change Act of Parliament. So we have made a commitment in a political context to protect our climate. And of course, last but not least, investment in renewable energy brings a whole host of economic benefits, particularly in the 2 key indicators of inward investment financially and in employment. So just to give you an indication of the extent of our resource, as you can see, the blue area is the highest wind speed. This is areas of our onshore availability where it's blue. It has an average of more than 9 meters per second all year round. And red is the next one, which is a little under 9, but comfortably more than 8, with yellow being the next one down. So you could see that we're one of the windiest parts of Europe, and most of our land mass has tremendous wind resource, good quality wind. If we go offshore, the resource gets even better. It's all over 8 meters per second wind speed, so tremendous resource there. This is my table of numbers. I have one other table of numbers, but don't worry because my presentation will be available to all delegates. But just to give you the exact state of delivery in the UK today, here they all are, 655 wind farms. Some of those will be very small and quite old and ready to be repowered. 22 of those are offshore. Just over 5,500 turbines. The split between onshore and offshore wind is 7.5 to 3.5. We are generating 27 and a bit, 27 and a quarter terawatt hours a year. And based on 2013 average domestic use, that was equivalent to roughly 6.5 million homes. The amount of electricity consumed on a domestic level would mean we generated enough electricity. The United Kingdom has, in latest statistics, 26.9 million homes, so you can see the proportion there. And we're displacing just under 12 million tonnes of carbon dioxide with that resource. So horrible, nasty figures, but there you are if you like that sort of information. I think it's important to recognise that the shape of the deployment curve is getting very, very steep. All the countries of Western Europe that have been increasing their wind resource, or the deployment of wind, most got off to quite a slow start. And in the United Kingdom, it took us 14 years before we achieved the first 1,000 megawatts. After that milestone, it was just 20 months before the second, and then the interval for each successive one gets shorter and shorter. So the shape of the deployment curve is going like this. We're now deploying in 2012 and 2013 more than 2,000 megawatts per year. In the year from June 2013 to June 2014, so really very recently, we have installed 1,400 megawatts of offshore wind. Very quickly, because this is a wind energy conference, I'm just going to very quickly dispatch the where we're at, just to put it into context. In 2014, we have just 5 megawatts of wind, of wave and tidal energy deployed, but our ambition is that that would be nearer to 120 to 150 by 2020. So, all the member states of the European Union have a target, and the overall, the collective target is 20% of all primary energy to be from renewables by 2020. Now, the UK's share is 15%. You might think, well, why is it so low considering our resource is so great? And the answer to that is because we were very slow to start developing. Our starting point was very small. But even to get to 15%, if you consider the starting point of heat and transport fuels, that translates into a requirement for 35% of our electricity, and we're probably not going to make it. Our estimate at the moment is that by 2020 we will have deployed 10 gigawatts of offshore wind, 14 onshore, and about 120 megawatts of wave and tidal. I will gloss over the benefits to the UK. I'll just go to the end. We see this as a tremendous industrial opportunity for UK companies. Now, costs. I do want to make an important point about costs. Renewables are always blamed for rising costs, and it's the challenge to the consumer and the burden on the taxpayer. I have translated this slide into euros because that might be more easy for you to identify with. But the point, if you work through the calculation, our support mechanism is the renewables obligation. In 2012-2013, which is the last full year for which published statistics are available, it was just under 2 billion, of which 63% was paid to wind. But domestic power is just over a third of the total if we take industrial and commercial out of the equation. So households actually paid £451 million, which is an average of £17, or most importantly, less than 5 pence a day, less than 5 euro cents if you take 1.3 euros to £1 sterling. But the most important thing is that when we do have good, strong winds, we are able to conserve the fossil fuels, and it will displace them on what's called the merit order effect. So our challenges, and this is really where I want to finish. One of the things when I travel, when I talk and engage with other national associations, when I engage with their members, a very clear pattern emerges. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. It doesn't matter how well developed your wind resource actually is, or harvesting wind resource. Our problems are the same, and that's why we have so much to gain by working together, and most definitely at a European level. You will be aware that we have a general election. We have one every 5 years, and our next is in May of next year. And if our Conservative Party were to win an outright majority, it has already been stated that they would declare a moratorium on further onshore wind development. So we have a real political challenge in that regard. We have a Conservative Secretary of State that is in charge of planning at the moment. And despite having passed a localism bill to allow local communities to make the decision, that Secretary of State is exercising his powers to call in projects that the community have agreed to support, and he has overturned that decision and rejected the project. Wind is a variable output technology. For a similar amount of generation, we need higher capacity. So we need a new grid, and we need a long-term perspective on securing that we get that. And we have just gone through a torture, it was a very painful process of electricity market reform, and we are still not out of the woods, but we are starting to secure contracts that will enable us to deploy as we go forward, but still some nursing to do before we go. So, some interesting challenges. I know that they will be shared with other nations in Europe, and I'm looking forward to working with my opposite organisations, National Wind Energy Associations, under the banner of the European Wind Energy Association, to resolve these difficulties and see more and more wind deployed, more and more energy secured, and more stability of prices as we go forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maria. Can I ask you one supplementary question? Do you think that the 2030 package will help you achieve what you would like to achieve in the UK? Is it visionary enough? Does it provide you with the right tools, so to say? And I know this debate is very European, maybe less interesting for the non-EU participants here, but I do think that it is important because this 2030 decision that the European Council has taken is probably the only in the world where you commit yourself domestically to reduce your greenhouse gas emission by 40% from a 1990 level. So by 2030, the EU has committed itself to having reduced its CO2 emission by 40 below what it was in 1990. That's quite ambitious, and it will have, I think, quite a big influence on renewable energy in our countries. So, Maria, could you say something about the UK there?
I think it's quite a difficult issue because if targets are going to be meaningful, they have to be achievable, but they also need to be quite challenging. So it's quite a tough call to get the right balance. Part of me thinks it's not ambitious enough, but I think the sensible part thinks at least it is a responsible step in the right direction. And targets focus attention. There is a saying we have, and I'm sure it's not unique to us, but we say what gets measured gets done. And things only get measured if they are working towards the achievement of a goal or a target, and we can always move those forward. Unfortunately, I represent a nation that seems to have an aversion to agreed targets full stop. And if it seems that it's too difficult to achieve, they will simply not incorporate them into national policy. So that gives us quite a challenge as a national association to get the UK to just step up to that plate. So at the moment, I couldn't seriously ask for anything more challenging than we currently have, because we are challenged enough to get the buy-in to the targets we've got. But over time, I'd like to see the barrier being raised.
Thank you. Henning, does the 2030 package provide you with the right framework for Germany, which is, as you all know, an enormous player on renewables? Does it provide you with the right framework, and what is your opinion about it? Will it help you to achieve your goals? Please.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Clear answer from my side. The package, to me, to our association, is not ambitious enough. We are just disappointed with this result, and we would like to do more, and we would like to have higher targets and binding targets on EU level and national level, and so we are disappointed. So, but maybe let me tell me something about the German energy market. Perhaps for the audience, you know, probably you know, since 1st of August we have a new Renewable Energy Act in force. We have some cuts into the previous system. The key points are that we have now caps for the extension of renewable energies. For example, wind onshore has a cap of 2.5 gigawatts per year. Wind offshore has a fixed target of 6.5 gigawatt until the year 2020. Before that we had a target, non-binding target of 10 gigawatts until 2020. Biomass, for example, has a target of 100 megawatts. That's a very hard cut for the biomass. And the solar has a cap of 2.5 megawatts. Furthermore, we have reductions in the feed-in tariffs for all industries. Wind onshore, for example, have reductions about 10 to 15%. We now started new projects with 8.9 euro cent per kilowatt hour. Wind offshore still remains with 18 for the first years with 18 euro cent per hour. We then have the obligation for direct marketing up from now. So the developers and operators have to sell the energy which they produce. That's a step next to a free market. Then we have, with a new law, we have the obligation to establish an auction system for all industries, for biomass and photovoltaic, solar and wind. For photovoltaic, the auction system will come up for the next year, and wind onshore will establish, or for wind onshore it will be established up from 2017, and offshore from 2019. And we have a regulation for the federal states to find a legal fixed distance, minimum distance between a windmill and residences, depending on the height of the windmill. For example, when you have a height of 150 meters, the minimum distance to the next residence has to be 1,500 meters. The good or the positive regulation of the new act is that there's no reach back of the new regulations towards existing projects. So existing projects have a kind of protection. And yeah, all in all, I think, especially for wind onshore and wind offshore, the new act is kind of a peaceable and agreeable act, but there are some cuts which we have to live with. having a look of some figures of the extension numbers in Germany, and at the end of this year, we expect 37,000 megawatts installed capacity wind onshore. Wind offshore, there will be round about 1,000 megawatts, and there are more than 3,000 under construction. So the target of 6.5 gigawatt until 2020 is reachable. We still have in Germany a very high acceptance of the energy transition. Some weeks ago, we've made a survey among the citizens of Germany. What do they think about the energy transition? And the result was that more than 90% of the requested people are supporting the energy transition, and so that's a very good situation, although we have this scary discussion about the costs of the energy transition. What are we discussing at the moment currently in Germany? We have 4 main points. On the one hand, this is the auction systems, find modeling the auction system for the different industries. The next thing is the issue of capacity markets, to establish markets, to find a way, to find an exit way for the fossil power generation. The third thing is a green book, which was published end of last week from our minister, to develop market design, a future market design. And the third thing is that we discuss or talk about a law, an act, how to get off of the power generation with coal, with black coal and brown coal. So that's the main topics which are we discussing currently in Germany.
Thank you, Jan Hülebjerg. Will the 2030 package and the idea of an energy union, will it help us overcome the challenges in the energy sector and in the wind sector, renewable sector in Europe, do you think, seen from a Danish perspective?
Hopefully it will, but I don't think it will solve all the challenges we are facing. And before elaborating more on that, I think I will try to explain how I, as Henning, is not that glad or satisfied with the results back in Europe, because I think we could be even more ambitious and should be more ambitious. And why do I say so? In this panel, I'm the small guy. On the left, the biggest market in the world is sitting, and just left to me, the biggest offshore market is sitting, and to the right, it's one of the biggest potential in Europe for wind at all. So I'm the small guy here. But still, looking then at Denmark, what is our role in the European context and also in the industry? We are very often the guys who always pushing the bar even higher or pressing the limits even further out. For example, for the moment, back home in Denmark, we at least have the biggest and even the 2 biggest turbines in the world. They are staying back home. They are about 200 meters tip height. The biggest is 225 meters for tip height for the moment. We have the highest share of wind in the electricity system seen on a national basis. The first half of this year, more than 40% of our electricity consumption have been based on wind. In 2020, we will pass 50, and just 1 or 2 years after 2020, if we stick to plans as they look like for the moment, we will pass 60%, maybe already in 21, maybe 22. So we are basically always pushing the bar even higher, meaning that then talking about regulatory issues, we are also very often them who are first to solve some of the challenges we see in the energy system. Of course, we also are some of the first ones to solve the challenge in the industry, because we today deal with so big parts to a turbine which never have been produced in any other industry. So we are always pushing these barriers. And then back to the European system, I think, being an economist myself, at least many years ago, we are very often talking about these normal markets. There is never such a thing as a normal market, and definitely not in the energy area. So the challenge we see here, I think, if we should stay away from the industry, because of course Maria and I, we compete heavily on where should the investments in the companies be located, because Maria has politicians, Sonja has the same. If they are going to develop their markets even further, they would like that all the company investments are taking place in the given market. Again, if we should succeed in wind, we have to drive costs far down, to be much more cheaper than we are today. To do that, the supply chain must be competitive. It must be effective. And therefore, of course, there will be also local production, for example, here in Turkey, but it has to be seen in relation to the market, the regional market, the size of that, with the type of competences is already there, and then it will be possible to reduce costs even further. It's basically the same challenge we see in relation to the European system, because electricity must be able to be traded as any other goods across Europe. And that's a huge challenge because, again, looking at the political system in every European country, we want to decide on our own energy system. But again, to realize or to make the huge potential in offshore or in wind in general, especially in the offshore where Maria showed how big a potential that basically are there, we must be able to move electricity from where it's produced to where it's basically is needed to be consumed. And that's, I think, is the biggest challenge in a European context for the moment. And therefore, we need the targets for renewable energy. They should have been even more ambitious than they are. If we are looking back the last 5 to 6 years in Europe, would the energy system has been as green as it is today, and has the industry been as big as it is today if we have not had the 2020 target? No, it wouldn't, because the financial crisis has shown that the only driver that has been in Europe for greening the energy system has basically been the renewable energy target. I think at least the years to come, and also after 2020, I think we'll have the same case seen from a renewable energy perspective, that the price on CO2 and these types of regulation won't help us. So we have to build our own case based on the renewable energy and the target there. So it should be even more ambitious. And then there is waiting a very tough job for all of us, how to build what is called a governance structure to ensuring that this joint target across 28 European countries will be realized. And if it won't be realized, how do we then deal with it? How do I basically, or my government, how could they basically have a talk with Maria's government about how do we together in a regional perspective deploy more renewable energy than we were expected to do, because other countries maybe will be lagging behind. So we'll open up a totally new political regime to make this happen in a 2030 perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan. Well, governance, that is the key word I need here, because I would like to ask the panelists that, given with what I have been hearing here, that the borders in Europe today is a problem in order to achieve an energy market in which not least renewables can thrive, because at certain times of the day it blows a lot, or the wind is shining, the sun is shining, at other times it doesn't. So you need to get rid of your energy when it is produced. And that spurs me to ask the panelists, should actually, do you think, this energy union, the talks about an energy union, which is governance to me, governance about how to structure our future when it concerns energy, should it lead to actually tearing down borders in Europe? And perhaps even, interesting for our Turkish colleagues here, could Turkey become a member of such an energy union or an energy, let's call it internal market, where energy is traded across borders, of course, provided that you have the grid facility? Is that actually the future seen from your point of view? Would that help us? I ask, maybe we could go this way down, so Sonia, and be as provocative as possible.
I don't need to be very provocative. I mean, I don't need to force myself to be provocative. I think this is a very nice European dream to have an energy market and cross-border exchange of electricity, and also cross-border exchange of electricity with other countries outside Europe, and for example Morocco, etc. And there have been projects. Then reality is that this will not happen tomorrow. I mean, for example, it's always the same. It's kind of what a country will see is kind of the security of supply for energy is hugely important for a country. I mean, geopolitically speaking, you can't take the risk of having disruption of supply. And you have seen that in the Ukrainian crisis in Europe. It's all of a sudden we realize that, okay, it might be a problem. And I think most of the countries tried for many years to ensure their security of supply. I mean, just to go a bit outside, I mean, not most, but a big part of the external policies of the US was to secure the security of supply of energy. This is no secret. So, and I think this also is very important within each country. And I see in France, it's kind of, in France, we made a very strong industrial choice towards nuclear energy 30 years back. I mean, almost 40 years back now. And this is very, very slow to change. But if you have a European-wide energy market, will that mean that Germany can decide if they want nuclear energy into the grid and they can refuse nuclear energy from France? I mean, does that mean that Luxembourg, which is very nearby and has nuclear power plant just across border, can decide that they want to shut down this nuclear power plant? I mean, I don't think that the French government will push for it. I mean, I'm very sure that they will try as much as they can to slow it down. And for example, we have already this interconnection with Spain, because I think you know that Spain has a very huge share of its energy from wind energy, which means that sometimes they have too much energy and they can't export their energy to France because the interconnections are too small. And the French government has no will of making this interconnection work. Why? Because they are too much afraid of the price going very low and then the nuclear energy not being
feasible
again. Yeah. So I think this is very important, and it will be in the long run. But from today, I think it's very difficult. And also, it's always, I mean, the countries that will have more renewable energy will be the more pushing for big interconnections. And they are not always the bigger player into the European scene and into making the decision in the European Commission. I mean, sorry to be very...
Thank you.
Not so optimistic about it.
I would say that we should also try to answer, is it desirable seen from the wind energy?
I mean, it's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary, and we actually worked, I mean, in my association, we wanted to, because we have always this question with, I mean, when do you produce? I mean, is the production compatible with the consumption? That was the first question. I mean, luckily enough in France, there's 3 wind regimes, which means that, and the wind energy production fits with the consumption now. But if we want to develop further, it means that there will be times where we actually need to export energy. And then we made a study at the European level, trying to see how much the production of wind energy in Europe could actually be equilibrated from one country to the other. And what we actually noticed, sorry for but I think then I will give the mic to Henning, was actually the big problem is Germany.
Okay, Henning, go ahead.
I think in very much issues, I agree with Sonja. It's a very difficult issue to have an integrated European energy politics. What we see in Germany, and not only in Germany, but on the EU level in different countries, is that we have a discussion of getting more decentral, pushing constellations with civilians on a very little basis. And these are two different developments which we have to handle. On the one hand, a decentralization on the EU level. On the other hand, a centralization on the EU level, and on the other hand, a decentralization in many countries, even especially in Germany. So I haven't got a real good solution for this question. Maybe the way to have a integrated EU policy is the right way, but I think in the next years I don't see a realistic chance to realize this vision.
Okay, thank you. Jan, what is your vision on this? Is it in the interest of the wind industry to tear down the borders?
Yes, it is, at least in some of the areas of what could be defined under the headline called an energy union. I think, first of all, the discussion about an energy union is a very difficult one because it is very easy to understand it or misunderstand it in a way where it shouldn't be misunderstood. For example, why do I say yes? For example, in relation to market design, in relation to trade of electricity between countries, and especially in relation to developing the European infrastructure in the energy system. Yes, we need an energy union approach, because otherwise all of us will ending up paying too much for all our energy. So, and there we also have already between some of the countries, my country, Germany, and the Nordic countries, and just in very short time, I also think we reach even so far out that we can get to Paris. They are linked into basically the trade platform, where we trade electricity, where we define the price on electricity at a broader and broader basis, because we need that. So we always bring electricity where it's cheapest for the consumer to buy it. Doing that is all at the same time creating a better value of investing in wind. Then where do we then have the challenges in discussing the union approach in the energy system? That's, I think, when we are looking at how do the different countries' energy mix look like. In most of the countries, you simply can't set it free and let the market decide, because then we'll end up having very strange energy systems in some of the countries. For example, we have so much wind. If the market then suddenly decide now we will have a lot of solar, what then to do? How to balance the system? Other markets where they have a lot of nuclear power, you simply can't just remove that one from the one day to another, even that the market would tell you to do so. So there's some challenges there in getting closer and closer to the energy union approach. And then I think the biggest challenge on the short side is financing. How to finance a more European-based decided energy policy. That's the very difficult one, because it's always end up where the bill only can be paid by you and me,
Yes.
as taxpayers or electricity consumers or energy consumers. So I think in relation to infrastructure, market the same, full speed ahead, because we are lagging behind. We pay too high cost in some of the markets to get electricity traded, and there we need to full speed ahead. But in some of the other areas, I think we need more time to get the system more and more aligned, and then one day I think it will more or less happen by itself.
Thank you. It reminds me of what former US President Bill Clinton said when he was confronted with somebody asked him, don't you want free markets for energy? And he said, stop talking about anything free when it's around energy. Energy is the most interventionist sector of all industrial sectors. Interventionist in the sense that governments go in and have an opinion about almost everything. So I think I have learned to take that for granted. So anything around, let's say, even imagining that the energy market will ever be free of the hands of politicians is an illusion, for good or for bad. Please, Maria, and could you also, in your response, reflect on, would it be interesting for Turkey to be united in such a, let's say, creature of an open, let's say, deregulated or tearing down borders energy union? Please.
Thank you. I would deal with the last part first and say, if it ever happened, of course we would want Turkey to be part of it. And you invited Sonia to be provocative, but you didn't invite me, but I'm going to be provocative anyway.
No, I know.
I thought you had completely taken leave of your senses when you sent a letter to all the associations calling for this unity. But of course, it's an important element of our European umbrella organization to challenge us and to make us think of things we might not otherwise think. When we are faced with a difficult problem or an interesting challenge like this, we identify two things. First, we unravel the elements that make it up, because it's sometimes too complicated in one go. So you take out the different strands and unravel it. And in that combination, we have technical, physical issues, we have regulatory issues, we have political issues, we have commercial issues, and we have some that are rather more intangible and difficult to define, like elements of trust even, and we have to get to those. And the second thing we do as a trade association is we identify the stakeholders, so we pull the parties together that collectively would need to work to bring about such an outcome. And we have to get them to understand that ideal doesn't exist. You can't ever come up with a solution that makes everybody happy. What we have to aim for is a solution that most people can live with for most of the time. So you're being able to live with it rather than it being a perfect or an ideal solution for any party. Now, why did we think you had gone completely mad? It's because of the challenge. We think this is a beautiful model. It's a really good idea and it has lots of benefits. But it's going to be incredibly difficult to bring about. And the challenges, the obstacles to making it happen are not the physical or the technical. We can find solution for those. We can even find a solution for the commercial, as distinct from economic. And by economic, I mean it's a homogeneous market that would be a challenge, not a homogeneous cost, homogeneous sources, supply chain issues, cost of labor, all the things that actually go into it. It's the way markets operate. So let me break it down and use just a simple example. When I joined the industry 8.5 years ago, and I wasn't from the energy sector, so I had to learn things very, very, very quickly. The concept was described to me that if we put an interconnector in the North Sea between the United Kingdom and Scandinavia.
Denmark.
All right, Denmark. How much hydropower do you have in Denmark? I was specifically about the contribution from hydropower, but we had this lovely idea that when the United Kingdom had, at the time, I was given to understand it was either Norway or Sweden, had well over 90% of its electricity comes from hydropower. So if we had a period of good, strong wind in the United Kingdom, and we were generating more than we needed, we could send our excess through the interconnector to northern Scandinavia, Jan's neighbours. And they would keep the water in the reservoir. But when our wind dropped, they could let a little water out to help balance our grid. And we would have this wonderful situation of a supply that was 100% renewable energy. And you think, I will retire, if not die, a very happy lady if we ever got to a situation where the whole thing was balanced and it was wholly renewable. But then you start to think about, well, who owns it? Okay, technical issues like different voltages on mains and so on. The experts tell me, the electrical engineers, those clever folk, they say, that's dead easy, well, that's not a problem. It's who's going to own it, who will have jurisdiction over it. If we put one in the English Channel, as Sonia has already suggested, good strong winds going towards France, that gets our vote. Does the United Kingdom want to be flooded with French nuclear power? Not really. Does the UK market, we have 6 utility companies in a competitive market. In 8.5 years, I have not managed to get all 6 of those utilities to agree on a single issue, not once. So imagine what it would be like getting 28 member states to agree on a European energy policy, I don't want to be a wet blanket. I don't want to dampen down, because I do think it is a fantastic goal to work towards, really. But honestly and truly, I don't see it happening in my lifetime. And I think an important element of that is that you have a group of stakeholders, and I don't just mean national parliaments and national energy policies. I mean shareholders in energy companies and different commercial basis for the way energy markets operate, who will be so vehemently opposed, who can be so influential and so powerful that they will not want to bring this about. So I just think it's as as unrealistic. There's an analogy here. If you read a textbook definition of any political regime, you read about utopia. They will all work theoretically. They're all beautiful. They're all the solution for how to govern a nation. But none of them are perfect. And that's what I think the challenge would be here, is that nobody would believe and nobody would have sufficient trust to let a central party determine the policy, the economics, sort out the technical problems, the jurisdiction, the regulatory, or all the elements.
Maria, this is nevertheless what we are doing with the internal market. Exactly that. And this is why the EU was created, actually, because we had borders and we were paying toll. So if you exported coal from France to Germany, you had to pay a toll. You had to pay customs. This was why the EU was created originally. They tear down the borders, and now you have an internal market where you can trade freely. Is anybody questioning that? This is determined entirely by the EU Commission and the competition rules on how you can do trade in the EU between EU countries. Nobody is questioning that. It's what I'm not suggesting it, I'm just provoking. I'm saying, isn't it worth thinking of for exactly energy perhaps would be the same solution to the benefit of the consumer and of the business life, because I'm quite sure we could get prices down by not having all these differences in our distribution system. Okay, this is my viewpoint. Jan and then Sonja.
Yes, first of all, I think the dream will come across one day. And Maria, you're still so young, so I also think that you will realize it. Let's see. Back to your question about how to relate it to what is going on here in Turkey and what we have realized being here. Quite often I'm asked to travel together with some of the Danish companies across the world, also to what we could call new market or emerging markets and that type. And I think, at least seen from what I have, I'm absolutely not an expert in the Turkish wind industry or the Turkish wind market at all, but I see the same discussion here as I see in South Africa, Japan, Korea, where you try to build a wind sector. I think here in Turkey you have all the possibilities to basically do it right in the first time, because in all places I have been, you start looking at the energy system and say, we need energy. It would be very nice if it could be renewable energy, and if there's a wind capacity, then let us use that. So then you start look there, then you're looking at the market, you're looking then secondly after, what about the technology, what about the industry? Can we build our own industry? How do we create employment in the individual country? You should also always go for that. And related to any wind project, there will be local employment connected to it. What very often is forgotten in the first round of discussion is infrastructure. And that's also why I have an idea about one of the big challenges here in Turkey. If you develop your energy system at a quite high speed, we have been there, you are just in the middle of it in the UK, then it's very difficult at the same time to get the infrastructure right, to get the money to build the future infrastructure. And you have to remember always that these three things have to go together. The market, the industry, technology, and then the infrastructure. And if you do these three things in parallel, you have all the possibilities to be ready to participate in any union-like thing on energy. It can only be in relation to trade, it can be in relation to market design, but it could also, in the longer run, be in relation to how do you help your neighbors out of the equation if they have a challenge in getting enough energy in their system. But it's very, very often, and I think also that's the biggest challenge we have from now on to at least 2020 and also maybe also 2025 in Europe, that the joint or common European infrastructure is not in place, and it must be in place. Otherwise, we can't deploy as much renewables and at least not as much wind as we would like to do in a European context.
Thank you very much. Sonja, please.
Yeah,
and before I give the floor to Sonja, maybe if somebody from the audience would like to pose a question, please feel free to do so. While you think of that, please, Sonja.
Yes, just because I did not want us to finish on a very pessimistic thinking about this energy union. I think, let's be very pragmatic. And I think if you have an enemy, one way of not having this enemy anymore is to have a bigger enemy, and then you make friends with your former enemy. And I think this what will happen in Europe is, for the moment, we look at each other as kind of Germany, okay, they are friends, but for energy, they are not such good friends, etc., etc., etc. And we do compete in our offshore wind industry, saying, okay, will the jobs go in France or will the jobs go in UK? And will the harbors that will be used be the English one or the French one? But I think very soon, in renewable energy and especially in wind energy, all the emerging markets are going very fast and much faster than Europe is now going. And China is definitely the faster of all of us. So maybe not now, but in 5 years or 10 years' time, there will be a point of time where actually I think European countries will realize that if they want to keep jobs and if they want to keep relatively cheap energy, they will need to cooperate. And it will create the condition of this energy union. But I don't think this will happen before we are very much challenged in our leading position in renewable energy. I mean, especially wind. But I hope I'm wrong, but...
Thank you very much. Unless someone from the audience would like to take, sir, please. Do we have a microphone?
English or Turkey? Because I need this translation in case.
And
Hakan Yıldırım, Siemens Rüzgar Bölümü.
Hakan Yıldırım from Siemens. I'm the wind department. My question is to Jan Heilberg. You stated that in markets, emerging markets like Turkey, so my question is to Yen. Yes, Channel 2. You hear testing, I guess? Okay. Now, my question is, I'm from Siemens Wind Power, and I'm also an executive board member of the association. Now, in markets, emerging markets like Turkey, you, for example, give examples like South Africa and so on. One of the biggest challenge you mentioned is about the infrastructure. You stated that it is important to follow these infrastructures. In the last decade, for installed capacity of Turkey, including wind, it is from 25 gigawatt to over 60 gigawatt, and we already have the infrastructure to increase that more. Therefore, with the economic growth that we will have, I'm sure that the investments in the infrastructure will follow this. Therefore, as you mentioned, this is also parallel in Turkey. Do you think in the other countries it could be a challenge? Looking at the I mean, no country would like to be only a market anymore. I mean, they don't want to be valued only as a market anymore. Also, we have to maximize the added value in the country. Even some of the countries are making this obligatory, like Ukraine, like South Africa. Some of the countries are giving incentives, just like Turkey, for having an added value. But this way or that way, each and every country would like to see an added value in their country. And the other thing is that the task of all of us at the same time is to make the price competitive for the energy generated from wind. It could be either natural gas or coal, it doesn't matter. Especially from central manufacturing. Maybe we should encourage local manufacturing. Maybe it could be a solution. Maybe if we encourage, for example, a local structure.
thank you. Jan, would you give it? Would you try?
Yeah. Yes, we have challenges between some of the European countries. Just illustrating one, between Denmark and Germany. For example, when there's a lot of wind in Denmark, very often there's also a lot of wind in the northern part of Germany. Due to some of the challenges in infrastructure, both in Germany, I think most ignore that there's some challenges in infrastructure-wise in Germany from north to south, but also in the trade, the transmission lines between Denmark and Germany. Then if we have a lot of wind, then basically the Germans in the south of Germany pay a much higher price than they needed to do, but the electricity cannot go there because the infrastructure is not there, meaning then the price in Denmark and the northern part of the market is even lower, meaning then seen from an investor point of view, it's a bad business being in the on the Danish side of the border. So that's just to illustrate, if the infrastructure is not there, we do not trade effectively. And then how to deal with it. I think, looking also at the Danish case, back in the 70s, where we were 100% dependent on imported oil, our energy system was one big central system. To deploy renewable energy, you need to develop regionally based energy systems. At least you need to be able to balance on a regional level. Seen from an energy system perspective, I think that's one of the way to go. For me, it's not necessarily a solution that you then also decide that what is on top of the energy system in relation to manufacturing or production of energy is the solution. For example, if you again look at the Danish case, the worst case of all of them, seen from a Danish perspective, is Denmark ending up being an island in a northern European energy system. Then we will end up having far too high energy prices nearly on every type of technologies, because I think we should force each other to trade openly between countries. There I fully agree with Thomas. Electricity is a tradable good comparable to apple, bananas, machines, cars, anything. Electricity is a tradable good to a totally similar level. So there I think we should have the competition taking place, because the players in the energy system, in the northern part of Europe and most of Europe, the utilities, on an hourly basis, it's their job to balance the system so that consumers at every time get the cheapest possible energy in the system.
Maybe there was a
Yes, please.
yes. Sorry, there was a second part of the question on local content actually, and I mean in France it's a subject we know pretty well, because we started developing wind energy well after Germany or Denmark, which means that we don't have leading wind manufacturers, and it's something that is very important to have the government support. And we are always wondering ourselves, like, should we kind of, as a wind energy association, should we kind of go into this local content? It's not possible in Europe. It's okay. Sometimes you have ways, or refuse it absolutely. The problem is, it's a paradox, because in one way, you know that if you have lots of local contents, you will have a higher political support, and you'll make more wind energy. On the other side, the thing is, I mean, the best you can do for wind energy is to be competitive with other energies, which means that you need to reduce your price. And this is not possible if you do local contents for local contents. So as a national association, what we keep doing is actually, it's definitely not requiring any local contents requirement for onshore wind. But we try to link pretty much the French suppliers with turbine manufacturers abroad, saying like, okay, let's compete with others, but we'll, as an association, we'll help you out to meet them and meet the guy who will buy in this wind manufacturers, and help them also help some like SMEs to identify that, okay, now they work in I mean, for us, it's railway a lot, and nuclear energy, because competencies are more or less the same. Saying like, okay, you work there, but maybe you could go into wind energy. It's the way we do, because I think it's kind of, in the long run, we need to reduce the price, and you can't do that if you have very strict local content requirements.
Jan, please, one last remark.
Just a short comment, because what Sonia just said there, I think it's very, very important to be aware of discussing wind in any market. That every day we are asked to deliver the electricity cheaper tomorrow than we did today. At the same time, in any market I know about, we are asked, could you please bring as many investments and as many employees as possible? And all the companies I know, even your own company, which back home in my country is a Danish company, even though it's a German one, every company I know about are looking for local cooperation wherever they are. if it makes them more competitive. And the challenge is that if we put up political barriers or political demands, as Sonia is talking about, who makes the technology more expensive than it could be, then we are basically working against our own efforts to make the energy cheaper on a daily basis. So it's a delicate area to discuss if you make it too generic, because, for example, also, as was also earlier mentioned today in one of the sessions, that, for example, producing towers. Today, the towers produced in Denmark, I think no one of them is leaving Europe. In the old days, we brought them all over the world. That's not competitive anymore. So a lot of the parts of the industry will be local, or at least regional. And then, for example, here in Turkey, I have discussed this several times, of course there is a potential for Turkey to put up some manufacturing which can be even exported out of Turkey, because we are here in a region where it probably won't be competitive in the long run to produce all of these parts and spare parts in another place in Europe. But I think it must be on a voluntary basis, and then it has to be based on what type of competences do we have in the local or regional area. And there we can build a very strong case for everybody, basically.
Thank you. Listen, I would like, now you've been in Turkey for 2 days, and you have sniffed to the Turkish wind industry and what the problems are, and so, and what the advantages are. What would you say are the, if you were to say identify one concrete challenge that the Turkish wind industry is facing? One concrete challenge that you have, out of experience or out of what you have seen here and heard, what would that be? And I will start with Henning. Could you give your take for our Turkish colleagues? What would you identify as the biggest or the most concrete and most difficult, perhaps, challenge that the Turkish wind industry right now is facing? Please, Henning.
Regarding to Yen, I would say it's, and regarding to our experiences of the last years, I would say that it is the infrastructure, having a grid to build up all the windmills and to transport the electricity which is produced. That's a key point to be successful with wind energy and with other renewable energies, and I think that's the key point for the Turkish colleagues, which I have to care for.
Thank you, Henning. Maria, what would you say?
I would say that while the contribution from wind energy is modest in the overall scheme of total energy consumed, and I was staggered yesterday to learn that Turkey has a population of 90 million people, so you're going to have a huge electricity requirement. While the contribution from wind and other renewables is small, the traditional, conventional power operators, stakeholders, shareholders will tolerate you as a thorn in the side and something very peripheral. But the more you contribute and as you grow, the more you will be perceived as a threat, and suddenly those relationships aren't quite as friendly as they were before. And that's what I would say to predict. That is the lesson we are learning at the moment, and it brings its challenges.
Yes.
Thermal plant can suddenly find unprecedented ways of undermining and discrediting the contribution you can make when you cease to be what we termed alternative energy. When you start becoming mainstream, they have to make space for you, and that's not a comfortable position for those who were here first.
Thank you, Yen.
First of all, what I have, at least having a feeling about or realized, is that I understand that all of you is more or less agreeing on the vision for 2023. Maybe the numbers will look like a little bit differently when you arrive in 2023, but the direction and the vision is there. And then I think what then will happen now is going into what you could call the more operational part. Then there will probably be a need for different type of support mechanism, not meaning necessarily in relation to feed-in or tariffs or that then, but additional legislative work was needed to make it happen. For example, it can be in relation to financing, it can be in relation to do some new legislation into the planning to make it happen out there. It can, for example, one of the big challenges, for example, they ended up having in South Africa was in relation to transportation regulation. They basically it wouldn't be possible to transport all the turbines needed to be erected due to some national legislation about when you were allowed to move around such big trucks on the roads. And you can easily end up having a problem you didn't have foreseen. But I think the most important thing is stick to the vision and agree on this as possible, also seen from both from an industry perspective, but also from an energy system perspective. And then it's basically just hard work waiting ahead of.
Sonia, please.
Yeah, I think I'll complete on Maria's say. Is what I understand from Turkey is what you offer in the wind sector is also a strong support from the government. And I think it's very important because there might be a backlash in a few years back when the wind share will have grown. You need to prepare it and to make sure that this strong support you have from the government, make sure that you'll have it from the population before the backlash comes. Then you won't have it. But it's very important to do it now and to create awareness about wind energy and create awareness about renewable energy broadly when the industry is still small, because it will help very much in the long run.
Thank you. I will not try to conclude. Nevertheless, I heard that that there was some enthusiasm about having an energy union, and among others, not. And there was certainly enthusiasm about connecting, about having a Turkey eventually as part of that, whatever we call it. I also heard that the so-called 2030 package, which is not enormously interesting probably to our Turkish audience, that could be a good start, although not sufficient for getting the wind industry in Europe where we want to go. And then I heard for our Turkish colleagues, let's say, 4 very direct and concrete pieces of, let's say, challenges that you would foresee. You need infrastructure. You need to be ready to fight when you grow up and become a real classmate, a threat to the others. You need legislative support at a certain stage to your existing target, and you need public support and awareness for times when the wind is not blowing with you, if I may say, use that euphemism. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to the panelists.